What happened, I was asked by the magazine Tate, etc., to write something to go along with the exhibition they're having on Van Gogh in Britain. And the more I looked into him, it was uncanny, the overlapping with the fact that I'd lived in this area myself. This was my first London when I was in Brixton in Electric Avenue. I used to stay in odd lodging houses around the area and walk a great deal. So I now wanted to do a series of walks that duplicated the journeys that Van Gogh had done, as far as we could tell, while he was living in and around London. One of which was from Isleworth, where he taught at a school, across London to come to Hackford Road in Brixton. And then another one was from Hackford Road to his job in the Whitehall Gallery, which was very near Covent Garden. And he used to walk that himself every morning, apparently in about 45 minutes. So I tried it and it took me a bit longer than that. But I quite like to do that walk again, and just to get the sense of how he registered London, what it meant to him when he wasn't a painter. He was still just sketching, making annotations in letters to his brother Theo.
My dear Theo, I'm already finished with my work at 6 o'clock, so I still have a fair amount of time for myself, which I spent very pleasantly walking, reading and writing letters.
So now the chance was to actually visit the house in Hackford Road, which is being restored, and to get inside it, not with the idea of tapping into any kind of ghostly presence, but just to see the proportions of that house and what it was like to live in this area at that time, the launching pad of his career. When he wasn't really a full-blown artist, so in the period when he lived here, all he was doing was sort of annotating his letters to his brother Theo. There would always be a drawing of the place where he lived or somewhere he'd gone out to on an expedition. They would go to Hampton Court, went to the Dulwich Art Gallery, and they're sketches. But he looked at so much English art, and he loved English graphic art, and particularly collected Doré, London a Pilgrimage, all those drawings of London at night, that Dickensian sense of London. And then he just pinned these with pins onto the walls of the rooms in which he stayed. And he took these round with him, the Dorés, right to the end of his life. And the classic one is the Millbank prison, where the prisoners are circling round. And he redid that towards the end of his life and makes himself the central prisoner staring. You see his face looking towards the point where the artist is drawing him.
But yeah,
They're quite small rooms.
Yes, this would have been a schoolroom though.
This was school.
Yes, it's still the original plaster.
This is the original plaster.
And a lot of these cornices are the original cornices. All the windows are the existing original windows, and they've just been stripped and repaired, which I think rarely gets done. Usually just get new windows made.
My dear Theo, oh how I'd like to have you here, old chap, to see my new lodgings, which you'll have heard about. I now have a room, as I've long been wishing, without sloping beams and without blue wallpaper with a green border. It's a very diverting household where I am now, in which they run a school for little boys.
He did drawings of the house from the street.
So the plan for the house is that it stays technically as a private house, but then we host artist residencies in the house, which I think is really important, that the house doesn't become just a museum, but it becomes a place of artistic production and a place where people write and paint and make sculpture, and that we can sort of support emerging artists. So we're going to do that by having sort of a variety of residencies. At the moment we're thinking sort of 3 tiers of residency. So at one level it would be what you imagine, an artist living in Van Gogh's room and painting or working in the studio at the back. At one level it would be having a writer or a musician or someone doing kind of more desk-based work who could just come and visit the house as their kind of workplace, but probably already have somewhere to live in London. And then at another level would be someone who's working with the local community and with sort of local schools and charities and interesting people in the area. And hopefully that will be a way of bringing people in the house who wouldn't necessarily, book a tour on a National Trust website or have the kind of interest in it. And I think hopefully once people come around the house, they'll start being a bit more critical of what maybe heritage means, or what they see as authentic or original. I think that's really important, that the house allows people to question that.
My dear Theo, I enjoy the walk from home to the office, and in the evening from the office back home. It takes about 3/4 of an hour. Things are going well for me here. I go walking a lot. Always continue walking a lot and loving nature, for that's the real way to learn to understand art better and better. Painters understand nature and love it, and teach us to see.
I think you'd find in these kind of houses here that they appeal to a clerical class, people who are respectable, often staying with families of foreign people who'd moved to England, and one of the ways they could possibly make a living was to get a house and rent out rooms to gentlemen. And he certainly wouldn't be unique in that. He was very proud of his top hat. He used to walk down here, top hat, polished boots, tight suit, breath of air in the morning, and again in the evening when he returned to that room. It's a very small room, isn't it? I mean, you know, if that room is your sole place, then you do what he did, which was to strike out in the evenings. He would take an hour or 2 hours walk, reading the territory around here, and taking walks with his sister after he persuaded her to come over as well. And she'd become a school teacher, as he would do later when he returned. Meanwhile, he's fixating on the landlady's daughter, and is quite sure that when he makes his proposal to her, she'll accept him, and that will change his life. And of course, it doesn't happen. I was going to just say Van Gogh's London is so doubled in the way that you get with Jekyll and Hyde or the Jack the Ripper moment. This is in 1873, in that you have this very respectable man of business who's also quite excited by the nocturnal possibilities of the city, this sort of seething sexuality that's there as well. He's drawn to that. In 1873, not only is Van Gogh living in London, but so is Rimbaud. And Rimbaud is another massive London walker, going out along the Thames, reading voraciously. The two fountainheads of modernism in literature and in art are in the same place at the same time, but it's a mirror image career, because Arthur Rimbaud is creating his definitive works about the city itself as a psychic energy, as an engine of modernity, and he then stops writing and becomes a traveller, an adventurer. No more poetry. Whereas Van Gogh at this stage is cack-handed. He makes little drawings, he never does a painting. He stands frustrated as he crosses Westminster Bridge by the beauties of the light which he knows he can't capture. He's reading voraciously, and his time of vision comes at the end of his life, by which time Rimbaud obviously is silenced and gone. So they're flipped in different ways, but they're both here, and they both leave something to London that's intriguing for those of us who followed.
My dear Theo, in every part of the city there are splendid parks with a wealth of flowers, such I've seen nowhere else. The day before I'd gone on a long journey to London. I left here at 4 in the morning. Arrived at Hyde Park at 6:30. The mist was lying on the grass and leaves were falling from the trees. In the distance one saw the shimmering lights of street lamps that hadn't yet been put out. and the towers of Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament, and the sun rose red in the morning mist. From there on to Whitechapel, that poor district of London, then to Chancery Lane and Westminster, then to Clapham to visit Mrs. Lawyer again. Her birthday was the day before. She is indeed a widow in whose heart Psalms of David and the chapters of Isaiah are not dead but sleeping. Her name is written in the book of life. Yours truly, Vincent.
But we go through here to cross Westminster Bridge. What a setup, what a setup. The old con still working. Well, Vincent used to pass over the bridge morning and evening. And in the evening in particular, he used to pass Westminster Bridge every morning and every evening, and I know how it looks when the sun sets behind Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament. When I saw the picture, I felt how much I loved London. Still, I think it's better for me that I left it. And then he used to write to Theo. Theo, to me, there's such a wonderful charm in that slight fadedness, that something over which life has passed, and love for those women who are so damned and condemned and despised by the clergyman from the pulpit. So he had this mission really to the fallen women as he saw it, and the prostitutes. It was almost a Jesus complex that was involved with his walking, the double life of London, of the top-hatted businessmen going through, and then in the evening the prostitutes who were coming out onto the streets to make a living. I think quite a lot to the business of being in the city that epitomized modernity and capitalism and technological advances, that by the time he was here you already had underground system, you had telephones, light methods of light were changing. It was the modern city, the beginning of the modern city, and I think he saw its birth, felt its power, was attracted to it, but spent his time looking for the things, the cracks at the edge of things, the little parks, the shrubs, the liminal grounds, the galleries, the record of an older culture. That's what he seemed to be going for, as well as his own personal confusions in trying to define what he was going to do with his own life. He was quite up to being an art dealer to start with. He believed in business, hard-nosed business, and he was not selling paintings so much as selling reproductions in prints and engravings. And most of them had a literary or moralistic edge to them. Saying if Van Gogh walked up here, he would be getting this tremendous sense of London as an imperial colonial entity. He'd be walking along as one of the crowd, man of the crowd in his top hat, stiffening his resolve for a day's dealing and trading, and then back out to what was then a quiet suburb. I'm going in to reconnect with Van Gogh's sunflowers. It's now pull out and send. The history is there. Yeah, the dealer was up here towards Covent Garden, and that's where he trotted every morning. And if you could do that in 45 minutes from where we've been, I think you're going some. Especially, as you say, the streets were incredibly crowded. So the last part you'd have been shoving through a great mass of people. I mean, it meant he started in London as part of the business of the city. He wasn't here as a sort of gap year student. And London was where he wanted to be. And it was where he wasn't able to be. He couldn't do it. And what we're left with are this series of walks and mainly letters and some drawings. But I think it was an important part of his life.
My dear Theo, always continue walking a lot and loving nature, for that's the real way to learn to understand art better and better. Yours truly, Vincent.